guys, welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new around here, my name is Divyanka and I'm a doctor of pharmacy here in the US. On this channel, I strive to provide you guys with resources to help build your ideal professional life. And today we are back on the FocusRx show. On this podcast, we talk to professionals thriving in their industry, in their careers, so that we personally can get inspired by their stories. And today, for episode 9 of the FocusRx show, I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Janan, who is a PharmD with a very non-traditional career path. I absolutely loved speaking with her. I haven't interviewed anyone for the FocusRx show in quite some time, and it definitely got me excited. Just seeing other PharmDs doing what they love in a non-traditional capacity makes me so happy, and honestly, I personally learned so much from the conversation, not only to put towards my career, but just good learnings for an overall good, productive, professional life. So I really hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I hope this is helpful for you guys as always. And if you guys ever have any recommendations of who I should interview so you guys can learn from their story, please do let me know. I always try to not make these intros long and then I end up rambling. So we are going to end that there and on to the actual interview. So welcome, Janan, to the FocusRx show. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a while since I've recorded an episode, so I'm happy to have you be the first one kind of back in the groove of things. I just want to hand it over to you for you to explain to everyone kind of your background, where you're coming from. And I know you have a super non-traditional pharmacy background, so I think people will be really interested in that. And over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here. I am a very non-traditional pharmacist. My career path has just been a series of beautiful challenges and being in the right place in the right time. I spent the majority of my career to date at the American Pharmacists Association in publishing, actually, working as a content developer, to being as an associate director, then I was a director, and then I ended my career there as a senior director. And I transitioned to a new place called CME Outfitters, which is a part of No Fully Learning Group. It is a continuing medical education company where I am a medical program manager. And I also do a little bit of writing on the side with GoodRx for just consumers. And then I'm also the Chief Content Officer of the Happy PharmD. And then I'm starting another thing. Let's see how it goes. I'm just starting a company called Global Bookshelves International, which is a publishing company to help publish books for children, healthcare, and cookbooks. So that's a little bit about me. Very non-traditional.
That is very non-traditional. I love it. I love that you are also doing so many different types of things. Like you mentioned, the writing and of course your publishing background, the new company, so entrepreneurship and freelancing. And that with Happy PharmD, if those of you who don't know, Happy PharmD is like a coaching company, and Janan is a coach there, and that's actually how we met. And so that's so cool that you have all these different backgrounds. To speak to your current role, could you just give us an overview of exactly kind of what your day-to-day is and what your role at the CME company entails?
Yeah, so as a medical program manager at CME Outfitters, I'm responsible for developing multimedia materials, whether it's for live or on-demand content. So videos, slides, infographics, that kind of thing, that is specifically for continuing medical education that either healthcare workers, even pharmacists, because it's a joint accredited company, can go when you're looking for your continuing education credits. So the content that we create is across a variety of therapeutic areas. I'm responsible for the content development, for identifying and working with the different faculty, and actually executing the educational activities that we receive grant funding for from pharmaceutical companies.
That is very cool. And again, something that I didn't even know about. So, and I think the CME world in general, like I've gotten in touch with a few people, pharmacists, MDs, et cetera, who do work in the CME world. And it's, again, something that we as pharmacy students, and me being so close to pharmacy school, can attest to, something that we never hear about. So in regards to your work in your company specifically, are you the only PharmD on your team and at the company, or do you see other PharmDs as well? And then broader to that, in terms of other healthcare professionals, what's kind of the landscape that you're seeing?
Yeah, so pharmacists are hired at CME companies. If you think of some other competing CME companies, you might think of Medscape, you might think of WebMD, which is related to Medscape. They produce CME. In my team in general, there are other pharmacists, there's MDs, there are people that are PhD in the science because we're really trying to be able to translate clinical data into practice. And in general, for this world of medical writing, medical education, and creating CMEs, whether you're going to be editing as an editor or writing or creating the content, there is a space for pharmacists and other healthcare providers. So it's a really interesting field.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. And I think what I tell people all the time is, in the MD kind of doctor world, it's very well known that you can go down like literally a million different pathways and use your degree in so many different ways as a consultant or a freelancer. That doesn't really open up to PharmDs and pharmacists as much from what I can tell. So I recently stumbled upon that myself. And so it's like amazing to see more people doing that. And thank you for educating our audience here on that as well. Just going to shift gears into kind of more fun questions, I guess, and to have a better look into your everyday life and how your job kind of fits into your life. So my first question for you is, what time does your alarm go off on a normal work day? And what time do you actually end up getting up to do work?
Yeah, so I usually set my alarm for 6 a.m. I happen to be an early riser, so I usually wake up before naturally. I looked up, have you heard of chronotypes?
I
Like
have not.
that's something you can Google. There are apparently chronotypes, so how time. You've heard of people that might be like night owls or larks that like are early birds and stuff. So I think I tend to be more of an early bird, but there's scientific data behind all this and how some people can kind of instinctively with their circadian rhythm kind of wake up before. But anyway, yeah, I naturally wake up pretty early. And other days, if I have a lot more that I want to do on my own time, because I do have 3 young children, 3 daughters that are also living here at my house. I get up a little early before the rest to start my to-do list and get ready before the day actually starts. My work day actually starts closer to 8 o'clock.
Okay. Awesome. And right now, are you working remotely through the pandemic? And is your role going to be remote kind of forever? Or how does that landscape look for your role?
Yeah, so I've been a remote employee in all the positions that I described earlier. Everything has been remote, even pre-pandemic. So yeah, everything that I currently do, including my business idea, it's all remote. Happy PharmD,
It's a crazy world.
APHA. Yeah, it's very interesting to be able to do everything from your home.
And at APHA, that also was a role that kind of surprised me. And again, something I never thought of. Is the whole company remote as such, or was it specifically the publishing department? Or how are they broken up like that?
Yeah, so I did start in DC at the headquarters, and I just had a personal move. My spouse is also a pharmacist, so we had to move to Kentucky. And my role in the publishing division was such that you don't necessarily have to be in person. And this at the time pre-pandemic, I was still able to fly in, to DC about quarterly. Because of the pandemic, many departments are, well, we're all, I think at this point they are still fully remote. I think there are probably plans to return to the office, but the publishing division, they're located all over the US because our subject matter experts, and that goes for CME Outfitters, my current company. It is a fully remote operation, and it plans to be even post-pandemic.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of always been a vision. And of course, it's come true for me through the pandemic and graduating in the pandemic as well. And just naturally being in pharma, it's just something I'm able to do. But I think more roles are understanding that we can adapt that. And again, not seen as much in the pharmacy world. So that's awesome to see. Now, speaking from a lens of both your, APHA, CME day job, your freelancing and coaching work with Happy PharmD, your business ventures, and your other freelancing work with GoodRx, that's many different avenues. And I think personally, I have done some research, and I'm a freelancer in the medical writing world myself. So I feel like I've touched upon this a little bit, but from all of those lenses, what advice do you have for someone wanting to pursue any of those things? And you can talk specifically to each one if that's more helpful, in terms of general advice, what you should kind of think about, things that, we're not told generally in anything you could educate us on.
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to know what you're interested in and pursue it. So, for example, my main advice is if you're trying to get in the space that relates to writing, or I've described education, in all of the fields that I'm doing, in some way, I'm helping someone learn something, whether it's through coaching, whether it's through a book, now whether it's through CME or an article. So what was really unique of what I did in my fellowship that helped me get here, it was a fellowship specifically on educational technology, research and development. Not everyone can do that fellowship. I'm not telling you to, but what I learned that I was able to translate and take to all these different positions are stay current on the latest evidence and emerging, whether it's therapies. If you're really thinking, most of you are pharmacists listening here or trying to go into this field, what are the emerging therapies? What is educational design? What are activity formats that people are learning? What is instructional design? I worked with instructional designers and that really helped me. And I still read constantly about these fields. In general, as I shared, I'm very curious about the science of how people learn. So in order to do any of these roles, you have to be curious. You have to be able to write. I would say you have to be perhaps able to edit, and most importantly, synthesize information. And then when it comes time, be confident in your ability to provide suggestions and convey these compelling messages. And I would say the last major area that I think I've learned through my years is just being able to interact with these great minds, with these subject matter experts. I would still consider myself a generalist, even though I've had to learn about really, really specific fields of pharmacy in order to publish a book or write and create a continuing medical education around it. But I was able to learn enough about it to be able to speak to it. And that goes back to how you learn in pharmacy school, how you learn and can translate the data. So I hope that was helpful, but that's my main takeaway advice.
No, that's super helpful. And I think if not for anyone, for me as well, not only for FocusRx, and I think that's kind of a realm that I have to learn more about, how people learn how to not only synthesize information, but then present it to XYZ audience. And just, being a writer in my day job as well, like that's obviously a very, very different audience. So I've had kind of thoughts about that. And I've learned a little bit in, I guess, the last year and a half, but definitely have more ways to go. Asking selfishly and for everyone else, do you have any kind of go-to or favorite resources to stay up to date, both on the clinical side of things and just general news or anything else that you use to learn?
Yeah, for emerging clinical information, I'm literally scouring the internet. I'm subscribed to as many possible topics in the different disease state categories that I'm involved in. And it's from all of these different search engines that are out there, whether it's Medscape or, other resources. There's just a lot out there, and even just reading and just trying to stay up to date with the current data. Mm-hmm. The other area I would say for just learning about the science of people learning, a lot of this is based in what's happening in K through 12 and elementary education, because they are able to study the science and how schools are able to teach children. And in so many ways, the stuff that does well in children can actually translate. It sounds like, kids learn differently than adults, but there are a lot of similarities. There's a lot of research out there. I've been just going to conferences. I sign up for now because of the pandemic. There are so many free resources that you can search, and just trying to learn about the topic I'm most interested in is educational technology, because especially due to the pandemic, we are relying so much more on using online methods to translate information. So a lot of CE that you think of, traditional CE, is maybe like an hour long, and you sit and you watch and maybe answer some quiz questions. But, the generations are changing. There is this new emergence for wanting to just not have to do CE credits, that you have to sit for another hour after being at work or at your computer in a remote job all day. So maybe there's new ways to get information through live events that are on social networks like Twitter Spaces and Instagram takeovers and things like that. So a lot of companies are doing this. I'm very interested in that sort of, and even TikTok and, how do you translate this really important information about COVID-19, about PrEP for HIV, about all these latest data to the people that really need it. And there are really cool ways that people are studying. So if you just search on Google, even to find about adult learning theory, those are some ways to see how people are kind of trying to change and also learning differently.
That's awesome. I love your curiosity for not only educational technology, but just education in general, from what I can see. Just a personally interesting question that I have. I was recently talking to, as you can see, I'm very tech savvy, just being in this generation, I guess. And I was recently talking to someone about pharma companies specifically trying to get into the space, because obviously I think over the pandemic, especially healthcare professionals kind of took over social media way, more than before. And I think companies are trying to realize the kind of positive impact that they could also have. But I personally noticed that either companies don't have the resources to understand not only what will work, but what they can do. They kind of are way behind the times. And then a lot of companies are just, they don't have enough education to even be fully on board. What is your, experience with that in talking to companies? And I'm sure you have kind of a different subset of companies in terms of research on that.
Yeah, I'm learning that specifically with pharma, they are interested. They're using influencers, not just healthcare influencers, but I'm studying about migraine right now, and Serena Williams suffers from migraine, and seeing the impact of celebrities and influencers who have and suffer from different conditions be these advocates and be these patients that have these stories that really are personalizing the conditions and making it more relatable. And then, as a pharma company, maybe plugging their medication. I think that's really interesting, that this approach that we have, you're seeing more and more of that. A lot of this has been around, but I think seeing both, to your point, actual healthcare influencers that are taking over social media, as well as the patients that are advocates for these conditions and ambassadors. I think pharma should really, be careful, of course, of what they do, because it's power. Being able to use these influencers can really impact things, but it also has to be done carefully. But I'm definitely seeing that interest that pharma has in saying, hey, let's get to the masses a little better, because you might even think a lot of the traditional ways that people were seeing a lot, or either seeing the ads, that a lot, maybe there were billboards and people aren't commuting as much. Maybe it was in TV commercials and people have Netflix and different methods. Pharmaceutical companies are having to be a little more creative to get to the end user. So whether it's a healthcare provider to convince them to prescribe the drug, or a patient themselves.
Right. No, I think you touched upon the legal bit a little bit, and I do think that's a tricky piece to navigate. I mean, for social media in general, because there just are no laws. We're so kind of ahead of the times there. But of course, especially for a healthcare company. But I just see that kind of slow shift. Like you see, beauty companies and everyone else pivoting so fast. Like TikTok came and every company was there and is doing it, except healthcare companies. And it's like, that's such a big audience that we're kind of losing out on. And I don't know if it's that legal piece that is just taking time, or what it is, but I'm just so curious about that in general.
Yeah.
So of course, you've done a lot of job search kind of periods in your life, and you've shifted many times, whether it was for freelance or for your day job. What advice do you have for any applicants in general? As you know, we do a lot of interview prep topics here on FocusRx. So any general advice you have for anyone applying? And then if you could just walk us through kind of what each of your processes was kind of like. I think the biggest thing is, people understanding the struggle. Like I personally never understood that until I really went through it. And it was, miraculously through a pandemic, and I've done it twice now. So it's a new world and it's a challenging world. and job searching is never easy. So I think just sharing your story is probably inspiring enough, but hand it over to you.
Sure. I'm actually going to share a very unique non-pharmacy freelance job I actually also currently have. I didn't mention, but I want to share it with you to make this really relatable. And my number one advice is if there's something you're interested in, don't let a certain requirement or anything hold you back. So let me share the story. So, I've mentioned a lot of what I do. I'm also a mother of 3 girls that are aged 2, 4, and 6.
Oh
and one of the things, yeah,
how do you do it all?
We'll talk about that soon. But one thing that, speaking of how do I do it, I do have a concern about their nutrition because kids love instant snacks and junk food, right?
I'm there,
So
with them.
I do too, but one of the things, it's important, it's a responsibility as a mother. And speaking of social media, like we just were, there's an account that I very loyally follow. So if any of you are moms, it's called Kids Eat in Color. They have a website, but they're most known for their Instagram account, Kids Eat in Color. And I was just, browsing one day, trying to get some ideas. And the owner of the company actually mentioned that she was looking for recipe developers from her community of followers that have diverse backgrounds. And I was like, wait, this sounds like an amazing opportunity. I should apply. I have a diverse background, I guess, let me apply. So although that opportunity came very serendipitously to me, I took it very seriously. So these are my steps. What did I do? I created a website where I put my credentials together. The fact that I was a pharmacist, the fact that I do have a background in publishing. This was this summer, by the way, just to give you context of when this happened. I have a background in book publishing. I'm organized. I'm able to follow directions. I've compounded before in my past retail experiences. Compounding's like cooking, and I know about measurements. I talked about my personal experience about cooking South Asian food. My parents are from Bangladesh since I was 12. And my spouse is from Pakistan. And my sister-in-laws, I have one from India, one from Egypt. And I've learned a lot about different cooking. And so I also, as I mentioned, I have those 3 brutally honest children who've critiqued my dishes to perfection. So what happened there? I took that application seriously. I made a video as well to accompany my application, and I heard back. And there were a lot of applicants, but everything I described, the seriousness I took, even though I'm not a chef, right? I applied for this position. I told them why I would be a standout applicant, and it helped me stand out. And since then, I've been a part of 3 of their books, 3 ebooks that they've developed, and I'm a part of that community. So I represent South Asian foods for Kids Eat in Color.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, A, congratulations. And B, I'm like in awe because you explained that beautifully. And I think what I got most from that was how you put your more than 100% into not only each step of that, but each part of everything that came to that, if that makes sense, like your background. And I'm just like, that's exactly what I want from myself, from people that are watching this. And I think that you utilized not only technology, your background, where like everything that you have in your arsenal to make the story complete. And the last part of that is the story. Like you told your story for that audience very specifically. Like you showed, if anyone is to watch this episode, like that is the story to watch. That's absolutely amazing. And so cool that you put together, again, the website and the video application. Like these are things that are, I think it's so easy to get involved in that stuff right now. And, people reach out all the time about my website and have questions about it. It's like, you could do an easy Google search and figure all this out in literally seconds. It is that easy now. And utilize it for things like you just mentioned, for your own benefit, to make yourself stand out, to make yourself look professional, to make yourself do all these things and open up so many opportunities. So, thank you for that story. I'll hand it back over to you, but I'm like in awe.
No, you described it. I mean, it was really fun too. And I will say that you have such great editing skills. I used my iPhone for my video. The website was free. I used Adobe Spark to create the website, and it just makes really stunning website. It was professional. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing things that are free and doing things that I repurpose stuff that I already had to tell my story. And it's your exact point. How do you tell your story of why it's like convincing that other person when you're applying for something, why it's a no-brainer to select you, or why you're not just that, but why you're so passionate about it. Because what it has done for me and why I really was passionate about it, once again, is that it allows representation of something that I don't see. Because it is true, when I would go to those accounts and most accounts that help with picky eating, I'll see a lot of the types of food that are helpful, but it's not the kind of food maybe that's in my family's diet. And to be a part of something that now shows, maybe some vegetarian dishes, or, actually, so since I'm representing South Asian food, I made a Bombay chutney sandwich, and I got inspiration from a friend from India, a Pakistani keema dish, ground beef dish, a Bengali dish as well from my parents. My mom helped me that I've been eating, and I use the authentic words in the recipes and the title. So to even be able to see that and others see that there are foreign languages that, it's just nice. And I'm glad to be part of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And again, back to the story part, I think that is something I've personally realized, I think first through videography and photography, actually, it's all about telling your story. And so when I got into freelancing for that, that's something that really stood out to me. And then I started seeing it everywhere else too. And coming back to the job application process, that's all it's about. And I think once I realized that, it really clicked for me. And that's what I've been trying to convey, I guess, on FocusRx, is it's really about that. It's not about crafting the perfect answer to tell me about yourself, or the perfect way to go about your cover letter or application. And a lot of the questions I get, it's like, okay, what do I need to do this? And it's like, just tell your story and tell it well. And I think that's the missing piece. People don't even know their own story, and I didn't even know my own story. And actually seeing it from that lens to be like, okay, why isn't this person getting it? It's because you're not presenting it like that. I think is so key. So thank you for highlighting that in such an amazing way. I can hand it back over to you, because I know you had a lot more to say about the job search process and all your advice there, but again, I'm in awe.
No, that's really it. I think that's the takeaway. Just tell your story and know your why. No, it is important, if you see an opportunity like I saw, to take it if it's really something that's going to help improve your why of why you're doing things. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was honestly, to be really honest, it was a way that I literally now I'm getting paid to, as I develop these recipes in different formats, to do what I'm already doing, right? And it inspires me that, hey, I'm now published. I should really, instead of giving them that junk food option, I know the recipe. I created a recipe, we should eat it. And the kids, have more of an interest in it as well. So it was something that I wanted to do to help myself, and then, also find a benefit from as well.
That's amazing. And I think, again, that it's the why in the story, and you hit the nail on the head. And I hope that people do take that away from this. Along the way, I've been told multiple times, I think the first time was my first industry internship, my mentor there, my manager there. My manager there was more of a mentor. And on the first day, he was like, the only thing you really need to look for is to talk to people, network. And what's important is finding that mentor. And it doesn't have to be me at all, but finding people who can really guide you to where you want to go. So I've understood that that's a very important part, and that makes sense. You want to see someone and you want to be there, and they're there for advice and to lead you to that place. Have you had any big supporters, mentors, role models? Many of them, I guess, depending on the different roles that you've had, and how have they helped you over the course of your career?
Sure, absolutely. I would say you mentioned some great topics. I would say for, my biggest advocates have been my parents and my in-laws. They've always been there to advocate for what I'm trying to do and to support however they can. My role model, I had role models that I look up to as well. The one I can think of right now is an individual I worked with. Her name is Kathy. She's literally seen me grow. She was at the place I worked for years before me. And I always admired her work ethic, which I tried to model, her honesty and integrity and diligence with which she does every task. And having a role model also helps, because then you see what you think you should be doing, and then you see someone kind of doing something better and you want to emulate them. And then as a mentor, my goodness, you mentioned your first boss, or your boss in the beginning. Julian was my first boss, who was also serving in that capacity. He guided me through everything I know currently about publishing. And as well, I think coaches are important. I've had a number of coaches that have actually supported me to help support, shape, and develop me into areas that, I've been trying to get into, whether it's for business coaching, or I've had a health coach, check in with me. And I've had this coach for a year now. I recognized during the pandemic, I needed some support in that area, and to get better in those ways. So yeah, I'm a big believer in having all of those mentors, role models, advocates, coaches, everyone. You need a board of advisors to kind of be there to bounce ideas off of and guide you along the way when you have questions, or even when you think you're doing well. You may be doing something you just can't recognize in yourself, and you need someone to reflect that for you.
No, I think you put it perfectly. And this is actually something I've only recently realized, and I think I'll realize it more as time goes on. I think for me, it was that shift from going from, an educational school, college kind of environment to being an adult, and then being an adult in a pandemic. And that shift has really blaringly told me that these mentors and these people in your life who are there to tell you to do something are so important. And obviously, as a kid, that I still feel like a kid, you don't think about those things. I never thought about, okay, my dance teacher or my mom telling me to do this, or my, college professor telling me to do this. You have all these people telling you exactly what to do. And once that was removed, I realized how important that is. And I think the second thing that really made me realize that was Happy PharmD. I was, of course, an interviewer there for your guys' clients. And one of the questions I asked was when these, clients realized that they needed a professional coach. Right. And a lot of the people said, and it was striking to me because I was like, oh my God, that's how I think right now. You realize you don't think you need a coach, and you don't think you need a coach for each person in your life. I mean, each part of your life. And, I know that people have, trainers and personal coaches, and yes, they go through professional coaching and therapy in general and all these different things, but it never clicked to me that you need kind of an expert for every part of your life to actually thrive. And like you said, guide you in the ways that you might not even see yourself. And I think that more people need to realize that. I need to realize that. And so it's awesome to see you like literally actively working on that. And I wanted to ask you if that's something you realized kind of after you started coaching, or if it was something that you've always kind of done, wherever you see a gap in your life, do you try to fill that with experts? How has that journey been for you?
Yeah, I think I naturally gravitated to it, but I never formally had a coach until I became a coach, and I learned about the coaching process and seeing how vital it is. I've used this analogy before that I like to say that there's mirrors. A coach is someone who holds a mirror up to you and shows you these parts of yourself that you can't see yourself. It's there, and they're showing it to you from their angle, their perspective. They're not going to tell you what to do. The coach helps you see what you're doing, and maybe can, like you said before, guide you. And when I recognize that, and that there are coaches that, so literally I'm just getting through a leadership coaching program that's helping me develop as a leader and recognizing blind spots that I didn't even know I had, and you don't realize it. And coaching is painful. I will say it's critical. You have to be critical of yourself. You've had to work on habits habits sometimes that are ingrained, and you think that it's something else is at fault, but really maybe you're to blame. So I think coaching is very interesting and introspective way to develop, but you don't necessarily need a coach always. But I've found that it's expedited a lot of things that I've tried to achieve. Specifically, I also have just finished a business coaching program that's helped me launch the Global Bookshelves initiative that I was talking about. So, just having people, when I'm very short on time, I need these people that have been there to kind of show me the pieces. But a lot of times at the end of the day, the answers were already here. Helping me see it and then guiding me because they've been there has been the benefit.
That's amazing and honestly inspiring, and a note to myself that I need to, I guess, invest more of my time in that if I want to, like you said, progress, but expeditedly progress. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of in that half zone right now, especially with FocusRx, where I am a mentor to some, but I feel limited in some ways. And I think that coaching, even if it's not one-on-one, like you just mentioned, I think might be a gateway. So that was kind of a personal light bulb there. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, I have come across many of, I guess, these myths about the pharmacy world, but I want to hear from you about both the pharmacy world as an industry, and then also your life as a professional. And I do categorize those two things, I think, very differently. What are common myths that you've come across, people, if they're asking you questions, or just generally what you've seen on the internet, and how can we debunk them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest one for the pharmacy profession as a whole is that all pharmacists, we know this, and we know the answer that is not true, that pharmacists are just dealing with medications. My whole career path described that although I'm not physically touching the medications, I am related, but you don't have to necessarily be in that pathway. So I thought it was really, it's interesting when I talk to people, whether it's in an Uber or in an elevator, and they're like, oh, what do you do? And I share that I'm a pharmacist, but I'm in the book world. That's been really interesting to share. And I just recently did a panel talking to P1 students about non-traditional careers, and they also were, kind of surprised that there are these, unique jobs out there, whether it's in pharma like you or other positions that don't really show the traditional pathways. So I will share a myth about publishing that I personally didn't know. I thought people would just write a book, the book got typed up, and I knew there were probably some more steps with editing, and then you print it and that's it. I had no actual idea about the number of players and the steps of the process. And right now, due to the pandemic, in publishing, there are supply chain issues that are impacting the publishing industry right now. For example, paper shortages, COVID-19 impacting shipping, inventory, the fact that their printing isn't just straightforward printing. There's print on demand. There's, once you have the print books, there's managing it and storing it, and just a lot of players. And, I was really amazed to learn about that, and also learning more about the difference between self-publishing and working with a publisher. So if any of your guests are interested in learning more, they can feel free to reach out to me, and I can share. But I think there are a lot of interesting myths out there about all sorts of jobs, but thanks for asking that.
Yeah, of course. I think the main one I get, and I saw this myself because I did my market research before, I guess, really honing in on the niche of pharmacy here on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the only thing about pharmacy on YouTube is how it's a dying career. As you know, and I know Alex talks a lot about this. And I think what I've personally realized from reading and from talking to people is that I feel like pharmacy is in a shifting period right now. Like I mentioned, with an MD or a PhD, everyone is very well aware that you don't have to practice clinically. And I think just that sheer understanding has not transferred over to other clinical roles, not even just pharmacy, like even PT, PA, like there's just honestly everything outside of MD, PhD. And I see it as a shift because, of course, like we're in a world of automation, and you can't expect retail jobs to stay the way that they have been when pharmacy was invented years ago, right? Like, how are we still believing that brick and mortar is the only way to go? So I think there's a shift happening and kind of a lack of education there, and maybe lack of advocates, and you're an absolutely great one for this. But I think that's kind of where we're at. What are your thoughts kind of on that? Do you agree? What have you seen out there?
Yeah, I think that pharmacy is changing. A lot of people are, as a career coach, and what I'm seeing, so many people are trying to, unfortunately, exit the career. Or if I know you and I are on a lot of these groups on Facebook, people looking for, maybe it's side hustles. Maybe both of us are a part of this too, having these alternate ideas and ways to use our degrees. And, I think it is shifting. I think there is a lot of change to come. And, we'll see how it will impact pharmacy, because I think the future with the baby boomers in about 10 years, there are going to be so many more individuals that are above 65 that are still working, that are going to be on a number of medications. So, where do pharmacists have a role with them as well, and with the changing landscape? So I'm going to stay tuned. I think it's a very exciting career still, in my opinion, to be in, because of the sheer amount of content that we learn and know, and how it impacts so many people. Medications, so important.
No, I agree. And I think just from this conversation, like I said, I never even realized, the publishing industry, like all that you said, I'm literally absorbing and learning right now. And I think that's the coolest part. Like I made a video about the different things you can do with a pharmacy degree, and it was 9 things, and that was non-exhaustive clearly. And I think the coolest thing in this field right now is because it's changing, you can kind of invent your own thing. You can do whatever you want with it. And I think that's the coolest thing, and the opportunity that people don't realize. And at the end of the day, you do have a doctorate, and that holds weight. And if you use it correctly, it can really work in your favor. But I think a lot of people are just not seeing that opportunity.
Exactly.
So I know we touched upon this and you're like, we'll talk about this later, but how do you balance it all? Life, work, in between everything? How do you do it?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to having these coaches. And for me, now that I don't have all of the coaches in my life anymore, but they've taught me some skills. And the main thing is that I constantly try to reevaluate where I am in terms of my core values, and if I'm fulfilling them. So both at work and at home, because we're talking about balance, work-life integration, and there are many ways to look at things. The easiest way for me to do this is to reflect on one. I think it'll be easiest for me to describe. If you've ever heard of this, you can also Google it. It's called the Wheel of Life. So imagine creating a circle, like with a compass. So I'm going to just pretend I have a compass with my hand, and you can add about 6 points on the circumference of the circle. And each point represents an area of life that's very important to you. So 6 of the most important things to you. These could be your core values, or just things that are really important. So for me, I'll give you some examples. It would be faith, family, relationships, health. And I could divide health into like exercise and nutrition, and then career. So those are 6 really important things to me. And what I do is a check-in. Maybe this is weekly, kind of looking at, in this last week, on a scale, 0 being close to the center of the circle, and then the max being at the circumference. How am I doing in each of these 6 areas? And you can plot it. You literally can plot it. And these can fluctuate. They do, because, for example, some days I'm so focused on work, or I'm so focused, and you may have had one of those days, right? You're really into something, and then you forget. And it's maybe that day where you're just going to eat junk food and whatever. You're not thinking about it. You don't have time to take a walk or a break. And so that itself, the circle, then maybe is going to turn into a different shape. It looks like a heart now in my hand. But what I recognize by doing this exercise is that that's the definition of not being in balance. It's okay, but you'll see, because maybe your circle, if everything's low, your circle is going to be small. If everything's at max, everything's perfect. It's hard to be perfect, and I'm not suggesting that. But on average, as they fluctuate, if I notice that I'm consistently low in an area, I need to stop. I need to reevaluate the way I'm handling my life and fix that. And that's really how I balance everything. In general, how I do it all is just I make small progress on each of the areas that are important to me. And I believe in progress over perfection. So things don't have to be perfect. I do the best that I can, and I move forward. And that's the way I balance my life. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Very much so. I think that's something that I have personally struggled with, again, from just moving, like my student life and my professional life, and working from home, again, during a pandemic, like kind of threw me off guard in a way that I didn't think. I thought I was, great at balance and great at doing everything. And I was always involved in different things. And that's what I kept hearing, like, oh my God, you're doing so much, like it must be great. And so whether that, I guess, got to me in some way, or I just didn't pay attention to it, I never thought I needed to be as intentional as I actually need to be. And I think, like I mentioned, is staying at home working, your hours are, blurred. You have to be very intentional about how you're spending your time. You have to act like I calendar block. I'm definitely a huge advocate for that because it actually allows me to set up my day like I want it to. But these are things you actually have to do. And I haven't, utilized the wheel of life method, but I think that that's really helpful in seeing, and you can probably see your progress over time too, in terms of, how has my circle looked over time. So definitely helpful. Again, if not for everyone, definitely for me. My next question for you is, throughout your different professional lives, what is kind of one lesson you either carried through or learned that has had the biggest impact on you for someone else to learn and kind of expedite their own learning process?
Yeah, so the biggest lesson I've learned is, as we spoke about with goals and having these values and things that are really important to us. I think it's also important to be flexible. Sometimes in life, you may actually have to put off a goal just because it might not be the best time based on your life circumstances. For example, a lesson I personally learned relates to accepting something, whether it was a promotion or a position, and I wasn't expecting it. It was a goal of mine, but I'd also recently started something else new. So it was part of my goal, although it was part of my goal to advance and get that. Something that might be your goal may get you into more stress or trouble than it actually being a benefit. So I think that's what I mean by flexibility and, being mindful and being okay sometimes with saying no to opportunities. That's my biggest lesson.
I think you kind of spoke to me directly right there. Like I mentioned, I've kind of always had my foot in a million things, and I think you take the cake on this one from me. But I think I've always kind of been, like you mentioned, a generalist in a broader sense, where I know a little bit about a lot of different things, kind of jack of all trades, but never felt like a master of one. And that's something that I've struggled with, really realizing where do I want to be on that spectrum in different things. And it's a question I've asked myself now multiple times. And I think that saying no, but specifically saying no to opportunities, and realizing the impact of that has been the biggest game changer for me. It's not only saying no to, social events or spending your time in a certain way, but opportunities in the broader sense. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And as a student and as a young professional, I have learned that time and time over. But more than that, you don't know what a role kind of needs from you, and whether that's a professional role or your role in your family or your role in other things. And also deciding how much you want to put of yourself in those things. I realized as I was doing a million things, I wasn't giving it my all, and I was just, praising the top of it. And even though it was something that I wanted to do at the time, or it was part of my, like you said, larger goals, it wasn't fulfilling me because I wasn't actually spending the time in a profitable way for myself in that activity. So, and it's come to the point where it was even, affecting dance. Like, I was just doing it for the sake of doing it. And it's like, it's not fair to anyone, and I'm not even enjoying it. So why am I doing this to myself? So I think that was a really good key lesson. And I think that I will myself watch this episode now multiple times. And I think even in the past few years, and even since I've graduated, like, that question affects me in a different way every single time. And just saying no, but on a deeper level, saying no to things that you probably think are right for you might not actually be. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I know I've eaten up a lot of your time. Thank you so much again. I just wanted to ask you if you have any other advice for the audience. I think you have a wealth of knowledge, and if I can see you definitely being an advocate in general and sharing your knowledge in general. So I hope you do that, and people can kind of go to you for that. I know we'll have you on FocusRx multiple times again. I know we've discussed this, and we have a lot of different topics to talk about in depth, but any kind of parting advice, and this can be, on anything that you have.
Sure. I mean, you brought up something that it relates to the advice I'd like to share. And it's about, how do we avoid burnout and burning out ourselves? Because when we're young, you're much younger than I am, we can push our body to its limits day after day. It seems like nothing can touch us. We're invincible. You can pull all-nighters, this hustle mentality, working all the time, getting involved in everything, starting new businesses, and magically seem to do it all. But the point is, there is no magic. I love Harry Potter, but there is no magic. My advice is start developing healthy habits while you are still healthy and able to do so. Healthcare workers are the worst patients. Some of my friends don't go to the doctor. They don't follow the own advice that they give patients or they know is right. And I learned that the hard way about overworking. During the peak of the pandemic, we didn't have childcare. I was magically managing my work early in the morning when my husband wasn't working late at night. I had side jobs and I attempted to be a super mom and remote schooled by day and worked by night. But all of that came at a risk of not sleeping enough, and it impacted my health, So that's my biggest last piece of advice for today. Just take breaks, be okay with not being busy all the time. You don't have to do it all. Your health and well-being matter the most. So thank you. Thank you so much for all the time you've given me today too.
Oh, of course. And I think that is such good parting advice. And again, something that I have not only recently learned, even though, like you said, like I am just out of college, but it definitely, I think I've realized it more and more because I personally used to be a very, very active person. I was doing sports all the time in, middle school, high school. I was always a dancer, and I never realized I was literally like 50-50 during my day, activity versus non-activity. And whether it was a pandemic, whether it was becoming a pseudo adult, whether it was leaving school, whether it was all those things together, I wasn't putting as much time into activity, and I never realized how much it affected me. And even just the last month, kind of going back to it, I'm in such a better place. So I think that is really, really good parting advice. And again, something I'm going to take for myself as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. If, like I mentioned, if this hasn't helped anyone else, it has helped me. So know that you've helped me. This was like a personal coaching session, and it was great. So I know we've been talks about this forever. So I'm super happy that we finally got to do this. We'll see you again on FocusRx very soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
And that is a wrap for today's episode. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are literally so many learnings from just this episode, and I meant it when I said it. I will be referring back to this conversation at different points in my professional life to make sure I'm kind of doing everything she talked about and learning from what she had to say and her experience. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. If you guys haven't already and are looking forward to other episodes, please do like this video and subscribe below. That's it for today, and you guys will see me in the next one.